Here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is Edward Van Halen's Sus Chord Magic. And like I mentioned a couple days ago with the Finding Sus Chords episode, this is a continuation of that episode or this theme in the series. And Edward Van Halen definitely guitar legend, the late great Edward Van Halen. I think a lot of my friends and peers and students and just people I talk to, they're still mourning Edward Van Halen's passing, and that was in October, and here we are at the end of February. And it still feels like it just happened. It didn't really dissipate or disappear. It's like now I'm finding myself, listening to Van Halen, revisiting, certain songs and solos and things that I never really tackled before on guitar. Just for whatever reason, I just didn't really go, to some of these certain songs and certain things. And now I'm going back and revisiting a lot of this stuff. And I've also been reading. So before we get started here, I'm going to recommend a couple books. If you're looking for something to read, definitely Van Halen Rising is awesome, and also Running with the Devil from Noel Monk, which was Van Halen's like road manager and band manager. But both of those books really do give you a complete picture of the early days of Van Halen and then their rise to stardom. So if you haven't read Van Halen Rising or Running with the Devil, you have to check these books out. They're great. So I do have to admit, I originally had the plan to just make this Van Halen, Sus Chord episode. And then I thought about it and I thought, no, I think I should include a primer and explain, what Sus Chords are, and then hit the Van Halen, the fun stuff. And honestly, the episode, the Finding Sus Chords from a couple days ago, I put a real rush job on that. And I tried to put it together as, as best as I could. But I did notice a couple just minor typos, either with my mouth or even with the charts that I flashed. And honestly, I was just anticipating and excited about this lesson. I mean, no offense to Finding Sus Chords, the basics and fundamentals and the introduction to what these are in that episode. But this is the fun stuff. This is the Van Halen side of these chords. And of course, I'm going to get excited about that. But before we get started, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So Sus chords are basically neutral, sounds that you hear in music. They're not major, they're not minor, they're basically kind of in between. And when you take a major or a minor triad and you replace the third with either the major second or perfect fourth, you would create a sus chord, either a sus2 or a sus4. So here's an image with a definition. And then to give you a better understanding of where you can hear these chords and the sound in Van Halen's music, here's an image with a bunch of Van Halen songs that use sus chords. Now some of these songs might just have, like a sus chord that just chimes in, for a second or two. And then other songs feature sus chords like crazy. Panama and Unchained and some of those songs have sus chords everywhere. But here's an image, to kind of help you figure out, where you can find these sounds. One more thing before we dive in, this lesson's going to include some kind of deep cuts and, B-sides and lesser known sus chord, moments in Van Halen's music. And even though the songs Panama, Unchained, and Dance the Night Away, like I mentioned a moment ago, those feature lots of sus chords. But I'm not going to include those songs in this lesson. We've actually already talked about Dance the Night Away and parts of Unchained and some of those other songs. And no offense to Panama, that's arguably, one of Van Halen's most popular songs. But Panama has been transcribed and shown since I was in high school. So that's a great song, it's a classic. But it's tired, it's been shown and rehashed and broken down so many times. It's like, okay, I think almost everybody's seen Panama. But then some of these songs and some of these moments I've selected you may have never seen before. So that's kind of what I wanted to focus on. Just some, kind of hidden tracks here, I guess. The opening, that was I'm the One from Van Halen 1, and, great song. And really, if you look at the first Van Halen album, there's really only two songs that you hear or find, sus chords in action. It makes an appearance in I'm the One, and it also makes an appearance in On Fire. And then the rest of the album is really just, power chords, and there's a lot of slash chords and some other things happening. But Van Halen 1 doesn't really have a lot of sus chord activity, there's just a little bit. But you can definitely catch it in I'm the One right here. Basically starting with this, and it's just this busy kind of pull off. It's kind of like a hybrid blues, or you can think of like the blues scale right there in A. And Eddie's really just cruising down this 3-note pattern with pull offs and then grabbing 2 more notes right there, that A and C, like this. And then you're going to move that up chromatically. So just go up 1 fret at a time, like this. And after you do that, then just grab this C, D to E. And right there, when you get to the E, just dive your low E string with the bar and get that growling kind of lion kind of sound. Right there, Eddie's using a sus4, so he's doing E major, and then he's grabbing this E sus4 there with his pinky, and you can find that in Panama and tons of other Van Halen songs. But he's using the sus chord, just for this kind of brief movement, and it's kind of punching right there, which is really cool. And then go back to that C to D. And then Eddie starts doing octaves right there. He's also dipping the bar. So do E, F sharp, G, and A octaves with the bar dips. And that's that fill. And then the last time he's basically doing the stacked power chord. It's a C5 over G. And then a D5 over A. And then you hear him kind of slide off and he starts banging this E power chord here. But it's a really interesting application of these sus chords that just makes a brief appearance in I'm the One, but it's right there. Almost kind of a sneak peek of Panama, several years later. Next to the song Secrets from Diver Down, and I do remember reading Guitar World magazine interviews with Eddie, and he would admit that he didn't really like Diver Down, the album, that much, but he really liked Secrets and Cathedral and Full Bug and Hang 'em High and some of those songs. He liked the original songs from Diver Down. And he wasn't really a big fan of the covers. But Secrets is really cool. We're in drop D and we're down a half step. And it's something like this. So right there, we're in drop D. And we actually uncovered these chords in the Finding Sus Chords episode that, preceded this. But we're in drop D and we're grabbing this. So we're basically grabbing this. And there's something really interesting happening there. So it's D, the D sus4 to D major, and then D sus2 to an A over D. So it's kind of a little sleight of hand right there. You don't really notice that there's 4 chords that make an appearance right there, but that's what's happening. So D sus4, D major, and then D sus2 to A major over D. Really interesting. And Eddie's actually playing a 12-string guitar for this, so I don't have a 12-string guitar in my studio. And he's really just staying on this little A over D for that next part. But with the 12-string guitar, it actually sounds like this A up here. Because you kind of hear some of those higher, pitched notes chime in. So it doesn't really sound right if you stay here. But it does sound right if you go up here. same thing, but you're going to move down here. This is going to be C sus4 over D to C over D, and then C sus2 over D, and then you're going to move to this G over D like that. So you're mirroring the same thing we had right here. You're going to do it right here. So it's really cool the way Eddie, kind of pulled those kind of mutant sus chords out. This little tag here, which is really cool. Start the pattern again. Go back to that little piece of A. Repeat that C over D area again. And then he starts doing this little fill, which is really interesting. It's like part of a G, and then he's raising that up and grabbing that E right there. Really weird little fill. And it sounds like he kind of used a little bit of vibrato when it moves to this. It's like a partial E5 right there. And then you put all that together and it's secrets. Next up is the song Little Guitars, and this is from the song, like not the intro, but the actual tune, and from Diver Down. And you can see I'm on the Paul Reed Smith, and we're actually in standard tuning, but we're in drop D, and I also put a capo on the 3rd fret right here. So Eddie's using the tiny, he's using the little guitar, for the song, which I think it's actually like a minor 3rd higher in pitch. So instead of an open A string, it has an open C, I believe. I've never had a mini guitar like that. But little guitars, this is right before the the verse actually opens, so it's part of that extended intro, like this. So it starts with this, and we're kind of doing this really rootsy, gutsy, kind of raw, single note riff. So it has this really, cool feel to it. And after that growling, single note riff, you get a sequence of chords like this. So we've got the capo on the 3rd fret, and we're in drop D and standard tuning. So that's holding, an F on the low E string. It's also holding an F on the D string. And you hear him kind of chugging, those bottom strings on occasion. And then the top part, he's just grabbing these different chords. So we're basically grabbing an F sus4 to F major right there. And then it's C over F right here. And then you're going to hear that C move up to C sus4 and back. Down a whole step, there's E flat over F, so it's E flat sus4 over F to E flat over F, and then you're going to convert back to this B flat over F like this, and then right there you're going to grab this. So that's kind of like an implied F9 flat 13, I guess you could think of it like that. Really weird chord, really cool to see it right there. You can also find it right there, because there's your 9th, there's your flat 6 or flat 13. Really cool. Okay, up next is a section from the song Girl Gone Bad from 1984, and this is like the post-chorus, or the end of the chorus section. And you'll see, and hear Eddie kind of climbing with these sus2 shapes, like this. One more time. And at the end, there's like a really interesting kind of twist. But right here, he's really just climbing up this, barrage of these sus2 chords. So there's E sus2 right here. And then you hear the C power chord, and then he answers that with, C sus2. And then slide into this D sus2, and then pick the top two notes. And then move to E sus2 and pick through it. Move up, a half step. There's F sus2. You want to strum that, and at the very end, you want to use the underside of your pinky right there, and you're going to grab a harmonic on the 12th fret on the high E. Like that, like a cherry on top. Really cool. And I love stuff like that where it's unusual, and you kind of hear that harmonic like creeping in. And a drummer I used to play with, he used to call these Creed chords when we worked together, because they do pop up in a lot of music like that. Creed, you can find in Seven Dust music. There's a ton of stuff. Dream Theater. But those sus shapes, sus2. Just think of like a power chord, and there's your root D right there, and we're really just stretching up and grabbing the second, which is that E. If we're in the key of D. So it does have a really different sound, very modern. And we've talked about those on this channel before. It's just interesting to see, Eddie using them. Especially with that harmonic on top. That's so cool. Next is the intro to Spanish Fly from Van Halen 2, and you can see I've spared no expense. I've tuned my nylon string down a whole step, which is the same tuning that Eddie used. And we did feature this briefly in the harmonic special that I put together for Eddie, part of the Brewster's Millions of Branch series. But since we're talking about sus chords, I wanted to bring this back because it's related, and it's this part. So I don't know if my camera's actually picking that up, because on a nylon string guitar, acoustically, it's very quiet. And I'm beating the crap out of my guitar, but it's still very quiet. So if you're on an electric guitar with some distortion, those harmonics are going to jump out or pop out a little bit easier. But Eddie's basically holding down E sus4, Pete Townsend's, favorite sus chord. And we looked at that recently in the Pete Townsend Chordplay. It also popped up briefly in the Finding, Sus Chords episode. But right here, and then Eddie's basically double tapping on the low E on the 12th fret, and then double tapping harmonics, that is. Double tapped harmonic on the 12th fret, and then also on the 14th fret on the A and the D. And then he does single tapped harmonics on the G on the 14th fret, on the B on the 12th fret, and then back to the 14th on the G, like this, really slow. I just screwed it up. So you really have to smack hard, even to get, like any of the note to kind of pop out at all. And I'm really tapping over the fret wire. I'm smacking the fret wire right there at the 12th fret. And it would be kind of hard, harder to hear the note or the harmonic pop out if you were hovering over the fretted area you would normally play. So hover over that fretted wire, or the fret wire rather. And there's that E sus4 action. Then you're going to move to A minor, and it's going to move basically to A sus4, and it also ends on A sus2. Like that. But he's doing it, tapped harmonics. And then you hear it go into the... The last example's from In a Simple Rhyme, which is from Women and Children First, and it's the last song on the album. And we're tuned down a half step for this, and there's something very interesting that happens at the end of Women and Children First, the album. And we'll talk about that. It's related to this lesson. But it's this part. It's near the end of the song. There you can see we're basically starting with this part, and we're doing, so it's single notes led into an A power chord, and then single notes led into this partial like G power chord. And then you hear Eddie do like D sus4 to D major, and he's kind of quietly picking through it, kind of palm muted. And I think he might be using that 12 string again. I'm not really sure. You know, we had that earlier in Secrets, but I think there's a shimmery kind of sound when he plays this part. So he might just have, you know, like a slightly different tone, or maybe it's a clean tone and a distorted tone together. I'm not really sure, but something like this. Time you're going to basically move to D. It's like a D major, and then you're going to move up to C over D right here, and then it's D sus2 right here, and then back to that C over D. So that's interesting. Down to a G5 here, kind of strum through it and then pick the top part, and then it's a G minor 6 right here, and then right there you're going to basically play this D5, let that ring, and if you really listen carefully after he plays that chord, he lets it ring for a second, the very last note you hear, he actually hammers on this G right there, and he changes that D5 to a D sus4. So at the very end of Women and Children First, you'll hear this. And it's really quiet. And then of course right after that, it moves into, there's kind of a hidden track, and it moves into Growth, which Growth's what, that... or whatever. But, so it's not technically the very, very end, because that is the very end of Women and Children First. Growth, or whatever. But that is interesting after you have that part. And listen for it. You might need to have headphones or turn it up really loud, but you can definitely hear that final G on that D sus4. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chord Play with Eddie Van Halen's Sus Chord Magic, and I fully admitted this in other episodes, but I'll admit it again. Eddie really was kind of the door-opening, you know, player that made me really interested in chords and harmonics and a whole bunch of other things, you know, surrounding the guitar. But he really was. I mean, he was my first guitar influence, and you know, I took note of the things he was playing, you know, as far as licks and solos and stuff like that. But in the beginning, I couldn't play that stuff. But I could play chords. I could form, you know, certain chords. I could also perform harmonics. I had a bar on my guitar. So even though I didn't have the technique and the speed initially, I was able to chip away and play certain pieces and parts of Eddie's music. And then over the years, I could actually play like full songs and everything. But there's a lot you can learn from, you know, somebody as gifted and talented as the late great Eddie Van Halen. I mean, he's a master guitarist, and he will be remembered, you know, forever for influencing, you know, millions of upstart, you know, musicians, but also professional musicians all over the world, you know. So definitely it's a big loss, you know, in the music industry and in the guitar industry, but definitely his memory and his music and his innovations and everything will live on. So rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. You know, we definitely miss you. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.